On today's episode, I want to dive into the validation process. I was having a conversation recently. I have episodes where I just had a conversation and then I come and record some content. And husband and wife are buying let's just call it a fitness concept. It is an emerging brand, meaning they don't have too many locations. They're not on the SBA directory because there's only about 12 locations open at this time. It's a little bit more challenging business to finance because it's a higher price point. You're talking probably 600,000 to 700,000, or maybe potentially a little bit more to get open. Emerging franchise, right? And so, as I was researching this brand, I did get an offer from a major bank that they would do 70% loan to cost on the deal. We really need 80% to make the deal more palatable. So I went to go look around for other banks that I work with and non-bank SBA lenders in the franchise startup space. And another bank, they didn't love the deal, and they pointed out some things on the FDD, which is the franchise disclosure document. They said, well, why? They're just a newer franchise concept, and there's already 4 that are shut down, and they have about 60 in the launch phase, right? And so, what's going to be interesting is that in 2024, which just wrapped up, they're going to now have to put out the FDDs with the updated for the 2024 numbers. So, when you're looking at these new emerging brands, important part of this is really the validation process, because the FDD is not going to give you a lot, right? And of course, franchisors aren't supposed to make any sort of earnings claims. So really, what you're putting a lot of weight on is the credibility of the leadership team, the ownership team, but also you're going to have to get in with some of these validations, really dive into the validation calls. So that's where you're calling other franchise owners in the system. And so you really want to talk to a lot of them, especially in an emerging brand. It's even more important because when you're doing a business model that has a build out, right? It's a brick and mortar type of business. What's the ramp up? Were you able to get members, prior to opening your doors? All these kind of questions. So it's going to kind of vary on your particular franchise that you're looking at investing. But that's where you have to spend a lot of time, because you can't possibly get a good feel of it doesn't have enough infrastructure and enough time in business to see what a mature business would look like, right? Like, if there's a franchise model that has 200 or 300 locations, it's a little bit easier to come to a conclusion than if it's emerging franchise and they've got 12 and they've had a couple shut down already. So that raises some red flags, right? So you have to dig into, like, well, why did some shut down? Now, granted, it might have been because of COVID. It's a fitness type concept. There could be some underlying stories. But that's why it's really important to dive into the FDD and the item 19s and the item 7s. There's 23 items in the FDD. The ownership team, do they own any other businesses? What's their background? All this stuff. Obviously, the major point I'm trying to stress on this episode is, if you're looking at an emerging franchise, a lot of times the FDD is not going to paint their appropriate picture. Sometimes they have just their corporate numbers from their corporate location. Of course, corporate locations are always going to do better because that's their flagship location. And we also got to see, well, what's the territory size? We got to compare apples to apples when we're looking at these things. So all in all, is it bad to invest in an emerging franchise? No, there's a lot of great opportunities. Plus, there's wide open territory, and it's an emerging concept, and there could be a big demand for it. But it also is going to take a lot more diligence and spend time on those validation calls. Build out your questions prior to you getting on with doing these validation calls. Make sure you're really thinking about the questions you want to ask, the information that's needed for you to make an educated decision. Because remember, you're signing a franchise agreement for a 5 or 10-year term. You're signing a personal guarantee on an SBA loan if you're getting SBA financing. Now, the beautiful thing of all this is that a lot of these SBA banks that I work with, because remember, I work as an SBA loan advisor, a broker, and I also act as a franchise broker consultant. Sometimes just doing one, sometimes doing both. But having the good relationships that I do with different banks and SBA lenders, they've been around the block. The BDOs, they're the bankers I work with, they're called business development officers. And they've looked at a lot of franchise disclosure documents. And so they know what their bank's going to be comfortable with, what they're not. On my end, I'm pretty resourceful, so I can get the financing done. Usually, if one bank says no, I can usually find a bank that's going to do the deal. But going through the FDD and then coming up with these questions like, well, why did these shut down? And then you got 60 projected new openings. So when we get the FDD for 2024, what's that going to look like? So maybe I can get a bank back on board that looked at the FDD and says, hey, we're not ready to do it. But if they knew in 2024 we would have an additional 10 or 15 locations open. So my rant for today: do your homework always on any type of franchise, but on emerging franchises, really a lot of the weight's going to be on the leadership team, because that's really who you're banking on. That's going to help not only just sell franchises, but help the franchisees become profitable and be able to sustain a good business model. And since there's not a lot of open franchises, but there's obviously in the process of being opened and some that aren't reported on the FDD yet, you got to pound the phones and build rapport with those other owners, get the good, the bad, the ugly, and then you can make a decision. And as always, as you get further down the road, before you actually sign the franchise agreement, it might be advantageous to work with a franchise attorney to review and make sure there's no red flags in that franchise agreement. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you want to buy a franchise, you need financing, go to bookwithbo.com. Our team's ready and we're here to help. See you soon. If you're looking to acquire a business, stop scrolling on Biz Buy Sell and visit franchiseresellelistings.com. We'll do a customized search. You can get on our weekly distribution where we're sending new inventory weekly to your inbox. So visit franchiseresellelistings.com and opt in today. See you there. Hey guys, Bo Eckstein here. If you enjoyed what you saw, please subscribe to this channel. We talk all things financing. I've been in the lending industry for over 20 years, and I'm happy to answer your questions and provide great content.